So my next guest, Joshua Hart, is an environmental advocate, and he is out there on the front lines organizing and doing his very best to enlighten people about the dangers of smart meters. And there's been a fair amount of action taking place on that front. So let's bring Mr. Joshua Hart onto the show today, and let's give him a warm welcome.
Hi, Robert. Thanks so much for having me on.
Hey, Josh. Thank you for holding and being patient. I really appreciate that.
No problem. No problem.
So let's jump into this. Let's talk about what's happening right now. From what I understand, I saw some news recently that PG&E is starting to have to remove some of the smart meters. What's up with that, and kind of where are we in the general sort of smart meter, the campaign against smart meters? Where are we currently with that?
Well, to frame this whole thing, and I'm not sure whether your listeners are familiar with what's been going on over the last couple of years with regard to the smart grid, but essentially, what we're looking at is the telecommunications industry, trying to merge with the utility industry to basically add internet connectivity to the electrical grid. And on the surface, it sounds good. It sounds, you might believe the things that they say about saving greenhouse gas emissions or making our energy grid more efficient. But of course, the devil's always in the details, and there's a lot of devil in these details. And from problems with the health effects of constant radio frequency transmissions to privacy violations and spying on the activities within your home, to overcharging, which has been reported all over California, all over the rest of the states when smart meters go in, to fire safety issues. There's a whole load of problems with these meters, and the thing that we've been focusing on, to try and educate people about is the health issue. And essentially, we're learning more and more that cell phones and other wireless devices are not harmless technologies, that people are becoming sensitized to this kind of radiation in large numbers in our country and abroad. And just when we're learning all these new studies coming out about brain tumors and cell phone usage, the utilities are basically forcing wireless smart meters that put out very, very high levels of non-ionizing radiation, just at a time when the World Health Organization is finding that this is a class 2B carcinogen in the same category as DDT and lead. So it would be bad enough if it were just the fact that, hey, we have these studies, hey, the utilities forcing this on people and not giving them any choice about the matter. But the fact that we now have thousands and thousands of firsthand reports of health damage and the same kinds of symptoms being reported from all across society means that we really have a public health emergency on our hands, and we need to make sure that people are aware of this, that they have the tools and know their rights in order to protect themselves, and really fight back against what we consider to be an attack on the population. Okay,
so we framed that, and where are you in that? Because I did see some news recently that the PG&E was having to remove some smart meters. Was this a kind of a concession? Was it just kind of a ruse? I mean, where are we with that?
Well, what's happening is that the utilities have been facing a huge and growing public backlash against this technology, and the way that the utility industry has behaved is that they offer up concessions just as the civil unrest and the demand from the public reaches a really critical level. And so, for example, when you had back maybe 6-8 months ago, when you had dozens and dozens, hundreds of people coming to the Public Utilities Commission saying, "Hey, look, I can't sleep with this thing. It's giving me ringing in the ears. I've got headaches. You've got to remove it." They said, "Okay, we're going to do an opt-out program," and that sort of said people, "Okay, they're doing something about it, and I can go back to my life, and I don't have to get up early in the morning and drive to San Francisco and testify before the PUC." So what's happening now is that new people who are coming forward saying that saying that they're getting health effects. They're going to the Public Utilities Commission, which is meant to regulate the utilities here in California, and they're saying, I want this removed. The Utilities Commission, in a couple of instances over the past several weeks, has said to PG&E, you need to return the older analog meter and remove the smart meter from this person's house. Now, PG&E has gone ahead and done that in response to the health effects that these people were complaining about. But after we sent our press release out a couple of weeks ago announcing that the first analogs were beginning to be returned, PG&E and the PUC apparently have closed the door and said, no more, we're not going to remove any meters. And so what we're telling people now is do not wait for the official opt-out program or the official permission to remove a meter. If there's something that's hazardous on your home and it's creating a safety or health issue, you're within your rights to have it removed, to document everything, and to replace it with a safer analog meter. And that's what people have been doing increasingly.
What's the cost for people generally to do that themselves, or have an electrician do that?
Well, it's relatively inexpensive, and considering the health impacts that we're looking at, it's very inexpensive, and we really advise people not to live with these things on their homes. The cost of an analog meter ranges from $5 to $50. You can purchase them on eBay or many places online. Getting an analog meter is not difficult. Electrical supply stores have them, and then finding someone, an electrician or a professional who can remove the meter, can swap them out safely, and make sure to document it all, and document the readings, and do that all right. People have been doing it for under $100, and if your health, of course, is priceless. There's no
right.
So we say, hey, this is really worth it. People need to stand up to the utility, and at the end of the day, they're just a private party. They're not the government, even though they sort of, every day that goes on, it seems that these corporations are, more and more becoming sort of pseudo-government-like entities. But, we're here to remind people that this is your home, whether you rent or whether you own your home. This is your home. You have a right to tell any utility agent or, to get off your property, or to demand that they remove a device that is potentially harmful. And if they fail to do that, to put health and safety first, then you have a right to rectify the situation yourself. And we've been supporting people in doing that in Santa Cruz County, California, and elsewhere.
So let's talk about the protocol for that. So I go out, I find myself a very cheap analog meter. I find an electrician that will charge me $50 to swap them out. What happens now? All of a sudden, PG&E, they don't have my smart meter to bounce their signal to the next smart meter down the street. Do I get a knock on my door? What happens after that?
Well, what people have been experiencing, they'll swap out the meters, and then they'll get some sort of letter from PG&E saying, we've noticed that we've not been collecting, your smart meter readings, and a site visit revealed that, you've removed the meter and installed another one, and they threaten you with a lot of scary sounding terms, like federal law violations and tampering violations and things like that. But, what's important for people to realize is that on the one side, there's the law. There's federal law, there's state law, and then there's utility company policy. And tampering is definitely illegal. Trying to do things to your meter so you don't have to pay for the electricity is definitely illegal. But if you document, the process of switching out the meter, if you show that your intent is not to defraud the utility, but instead to protect your health and substitute a safer meter, it's very unlikely that any jury would convict you of tampering. So what PG&E has been relying on, and what the utility industry has been relying on, are threats that are not backed up by the law, that they hope that 99% of the people will back down once they hear these threats. But there's very little that the utility industry can do to you if this is your property. I mean, essentially, what they've done in installing the smart grid and smart meters without people's permission is that they've installed a communications device akin to a cell tower on people's homes without asking permission. And they said, oh, well, we don't need your consent. We have implied consent, whatever that means. And
right.
so what's important for people to do is to, if they have a smart meter, to send a letter to the utility. We've got a sample letter on our website revoking consent for that meter to be on the property. And that is important because it shows that you do not consent to this meter, that it throws the whole concept of implied consent out the window, and it puts the utility company on notice that they need to remove this device from your home. So that's essentially what we're advising people to do.
Okay. And obviously people have done this. They've sent the letter in. They've swapped out the meter. PG&E rattles its sabers, but nothing happens?
Yeah, basically they can't do much. I mean, if you pay your bill, they can't disconnect you legally. If you remove your meter, they can try and charge you more, but that's subject to, at least in California, that's subject to an opt-out proceeding. It's a judicial proceeding at the State Public Utilities Commission, so they can't charge you more until that's resolved.
Right.
And they can't really go after you for tampering unless they have evidence that you're trying to steal electricity from them. So people need to not pay any attention to what the utility company says with regard to your rights. Like, that's the biggest mistake that people make. They call up PG&E or their utility and they say, please remove this meter. I'd like to have this meter removed, rather than saying this meter needs to be removed. You have 72 hours. And so it's important for people to take back the power from corrupt regulatory agencies and from utilities who are forcing these things. Just so people understand, I think this is a really important point, that the utility companies have been lying and saying that these meters put out a fraction of the electromagnetic fields that commonly used household devices do. The facts are, we were just in Felton, which is a mountain community in Santa Cruz Mountains, measuring smart meter emissions. We were in the middle of the street. We have an EMF analyzer, and the levels of radiation surpassed safety limits in Russia, Switzerland, and Italy. So if you were in those countries and you were getting that kind of reading, the levels of radiation, the levels of human exposure would actually be illegal. So these are very, very intense pulses. PG&E admitted to the Public Utilities Commission the other day that they emit up to 190,000 spikes of radiation every day. That the antenna power is more powerful than anyone ever knew. And so this is consistent with the kinds of health damage that's been reported. So even if you can't feel it, even if you're not getting symptoms from your smart meter, you're still being exposed to very high levels, and those high levels have been sensitizing people so that they can no longer be around cell phones or Wi-Fi or other sources of wireless in our environment, which obviously, needless to say, makes life incredibly difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. What about nationwide? Where are we? Because we know that PG&E has been incredibly aggressive with this. What about in other parts of the country?
Well, PG&E and the Southern California utilities are the furthest ahead with installation, but there is some form of smart grid programs being installed basically in most of the states and abroad as well. But there's been kickback, and we have active groups fighting smart meter installations in 30 U.S. states at the moment. That's growing daily. There's a backlash going on that's growing. The Nevada Public Utilities Commission launched an investigation into the health effects of smart meters just about a week or two ago. The Maine Public Utilities Commission has granted people an opt-out, but they have to pay more for it, unfortunately, which we consider to be, extortion, saying, you can protect your health, but at a price. Mm-hmm. We keep getting inquiries from various areas. Oklahoma, Georgia, they're installing very heavily in Florida at the moment. And what's disturbing about it is that people receive very little notification. When there's any sort of resistance or organized resistance, typically the police come. And we've heard reports of police, working with installation companies to force smart meters on people's homes.
Wow.
We've heard reports in Santa Cruz and in parts of Texas where installers have actually committed assault onto homeowners who are trying to stop them from installing. Mm-hmm. There's been cases of property damage. A man's dog was tasered in Marin County. So whatever's going on, I think, it's definitely very brutal, and there's definitely more to this program than would, than is really appears on the surface. I think that there's a lot of other motivations that the utility companies may not be telling us about why these meters are being installed right now.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Have you looked into this company LightSquared by any chance?
Yeah, my understanding is that this is a company who has launched a satellite into space, into orbit, and their goal is to provide 99% of the Earth's surface with internet access and wireless internet access from space. And there's some speculation. I don't if you remember this, but I think it was about a year ago when all these reports of like entire flocks of birds dying and fish washing up, and there was just like a whole bunch of incidents like that.
Yeah.
And there was some speculation. I don't think that there's any proof, but there was some speculation that during the ramp up of the LightSquared satellite and during the calibration of its instruments, they may have sent levels of EMFs into the environment that resulted in the deaths of wildlife. And so, that it's disturbing to say the least that you have a growing population of electrosensitive people who are increasingly on the run from this technology. I mean, we know dozens and dozens of people who are living in their cars, who have been forced to live in the forest, and these are just ordinary people like you and I. And the idea that when you look on the Verizon map, you see the coverage areas and all the parts that are going red with coverage. And there's increasingly very few places that don't have coverage where people could live safely. And so the idea that having a satellite up there to shower electromagnetic fields all over the planet with virtually no environmental review, despite all the evidence that it's harming humans, plants, animals, that we're really surpassing natural limits with this technology, it's incredibly disturbing. And what makes it even more disturbing is that the mainstream of society refuses to admit that there's a problem and that it's invisible. And I think, with carbon dioxide, with electromagnetic fields, the biggest threats to our environment and human health are, in fact, invisible. So we need to be aware of that.
Right. Is there a connection between LightSquared and smart meters?
Not to my knowledge, but I don't know enough about the project. There are others who are more familiar with it. But I mean, the only connection being that it's another source of electromagnetic fields in an increasingly thickening blanket of electrosmog that's affecting us.
Right. What about IntelliStreets? Do you know about IntelliStreets as well?
I don't. No.
You may want to look up IntelliStreets. They just launched this in I believe it's Flint, Michigan, of all places, where of course there's the cratering of the local economy. It has been since the 70s when Detroit left. When General Motors left Flint. They've launched this program there. It's essentially what it is, Josh. It's like smart meters on streetlights, and they have these transmitters, these two-way transmitters, RFID transmitters, that act as like little radio stations, just like the smart meters do. Except they also have cameras on the streetlights, and they're able to relay information. And they're also able to control the time. There's a lot of real-time information they're grabbing. It's not just video. They're probably grabbing audio, but again, it's a wireless network that they're setting up on streetlights. So it's called IntelliStreets. You may want to look at that. That might be something of interest to you.
Well, yeah, I think it's just one more example of where we're rolling out devices using wireless technology with the assumption that they're safe if they're under FCC limits. And I think that assumption no longer holds water. It is not consistent with the research. And I think people need to be very concerned and aware that in this time of increasing public dissatisfaction with the government and basically, open rebellion through the Occupy movement, that we're seeing more and more means for the government to monitor our activities. There are these new radar detectors, new wireless detectors at most on and off ramps on the freeway now that can register with RFID tags on your automobile and have data on, where you're going, who's going where, what vehicle is moving. The smart meter can, when it's installed on your home, can detect what appliances you're using and how often, and when you go to bed, and when you're away on vacation. And when combined with the home area network that the appliance manufacturers and the utility companies want to install, you have a situation where what you eat and what you take out of your refrigerator is data that can be transmitted back to the utility and sold to marketing firms. So, the invasion of privacy is staggering, and the potential for abuse of the system of increasing monitoring and RFID tags and CCTV cameras in public places. It's really something that is going to get a lot worse unless we organize to put a stop to it.
So what do you say, Josh, if people say, oh, this guy's a global warming wacko, obviously, we're not gonna buy into this. He's got an eco agenda, green agenda. What do you say to somebody who just would summarily shut down this kind of dialogue, summarily just shut it down when they begin to hear things like this?
Well, I think that we found a tremendous amount of common ground amongst people with various political positions through the fight against smart meters. There's no doubt that there's groups of people who think that the climate change is a myth. There's groups of people who think that it's a major problem and we need to address it. But where we found common ground is saying, look, okay, it hardly even matters at the end of the day. What matters is that the system that is running this whole thing, that is making the decisions to put in the smart grid, making the decisions to put GMO food and to put corporate profits above health and safety, needs to be fundamentally changed, and that there is most definitely, most everyone can agree on this, that there are corporations and vested interests actively at work trying to put forth solutions to climate change that will not reduce pollution, or will not improve environmental or human health, but will fatten their bottom line. And right. those are the false solutions that we can all unite against and fight. And I think some of those false solutions are the smart grid, because adding wireless to an already unsustainable and harmful grid is only going to make it worse. Carbon offsets, which is like indulgences from the Middle Ages, saying that you can get someone else to absorb and to reduce their carbon dioxide, so you don't have to. The idea that we can continue our single occupant vehicle-based transportation system, but just change the source of electricity, the source of power to electricity, through electric cars, is a complete fantasy. I think that there's certainly some very difficult discussions and decisions that need to take place, given the limits of the natural world and the fact that we're pressing up against them. And I think whether you're a Republican or whether you're a Tea Party, whether you're a Green Party, people are pissed off that corporate power is, abusing people and basically selling their health and their environment and the things that we'll need to survive on this planet, selling them off for money. And what is money?
Right.
It's pretty insane.
Well, so I think the ideological convergence is a really interesting dynamic, because on the one hand, let's say you're a Tea Partier, right? And you're willing to set your ideology aside for a moment because you're focusing on this one thing, which is invasive. And one of the things that we know about Tea Party people or people that are constitutionalists is that they're very into property rights and private property and being able to own property, right? This is a fundamental cornerstone for their belief system. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, you have, and I've seen this with, kind of on the far reaches of what I call the progressive green philosophies, is that property rights become superseded by environmental rights. that you have groups like, the UN, for instance, in accordance with Agenda 21, ICLEI, and a lot of sort of local mandating that, and in fact, the first guest, Dr. Valentine, began to touch on it a little bit, which is the reforestation or the rewilding of the United States, but at the expense of property rights. The property rights are now a luxury in an environment where we're experiencing quote unquote eco crisis. So now you've got these two kind of polarized points of view who set aside their ideologies for just a moment to tackle this one thing, right? Which is that they agree upon this invasive hold that smart meters and the ingress and privacy and all that stuff has on our lives. So let's say, for instance, we can get there, work on this. Now what comes out of that? I mean, can these two parties kind of find other common ground to work on, or are the two ideologies outside of this one agenda item? Are they too polarized or disparate to continue to work towards some sort of a sustainable future where we have property rights and at the same time we're thinking about how we can sustain our environment on a more long-term basis? What's your take on that?
Well, I think that the so-called traditional left and the so-called traditional right have way more in common with each other. And as part of the 99%, we have basically the 1% who's making a ton of money off of taking our rights away. Essentially, we have far more in common as a common enemy with the 1%. And this whole idea of Republicans versus Democrats, both parties are selling us down the river, and both parties are serve the 1%. And I think that most everyone who's reasonable, who you talk to in person, agrees on some very fundamental things. I mean, yes, you do have a right to a home, to be safe, on some land. You have a right to farm that land. Whether you have a right to dump motor oil in a stream that flows to your neighbor's land so that they can't, have the same rights to life and the pursuit of happiness. I think pretty much everyone would say that that's not, that's not acceptable. So. Right. I think that there is a tremendous amount of common ground. I mean, I think there's been a tremendous amount of resonance with the property rights element, with the libertarian saying, I should be able to do whatever I want as long as it doesn't harm others. And that basic rule, I think we've seen a lot of people question their very stringent adhesion to a specific political ideology, and instead start to realize that, look, we have, I've always considered myself a liberal, and I've typically voted that way. And then through this campaign over the last year or two, I began speaking with a lot of Tea Party people, a lot of people who are more conservative, and I found a lot of conservative bones in my body that I didn't know I had. So I think that we are beginning to realize that we need to set aside these false dichotomies that, like, Fox News and MSNBC and basically the whole mainstream media outlets love to stir up. They love to have, the 1% wants nothing more than to have, the red and the blue states fighting out and red and blue ideologies, and meanwhile they can, while we're all busy fighting each other and hating our neighbor, they can go ahead and go and destroy the watershed with fracking and install the smart grid at our expense, making us suffer. So I think people are coming together and saying, look, this is ridiculous. On the other hand, there is this sort of corporate environmental agenda afoot, and this is being backed by, unfortunately, the EDF, Environmental Defense Fund, Natural Resources Defense Council. Sadly, the Sierra Club has really fallen victim to this sort of corporate takeover, where corporations look at these groups, say, look, they're powerful, they got lots of membership, lots of popular appeal, and there's this creeping sort of attitude that I would say is extraordinarily disturbing and alarming, and that is that, well, we're in such dire straits with climate change that if a few people have to get sick or die, well, that's just that's the way the cookie crumbles. And I guess if you want to make an omelet, you have to break some eggs. And we're facing a crisis, and if a few people have to die, then so be it. And that's the kind of beginnings of an attitude that led to the Holocaust and Nazi Germany, and it's this failure of respect for human life.
Right.
And a sort of command and control attitude where we're going to solve this through market mechanisms, through capitalism, whether it kills us or whether it kills your grandmother or your sister, and it's this sort of refusal to admit that the system that we're living under is fundamentally flawed, that capitalism that has no restraints and basically assumes a limitless supply of raw materials, that is okay, and that just by simply tweaking the market mechanisms or putting in compact fluorescent light bulbs or putting in a smart meter, that we can continue our lifestyles and continue the way that we treat each other and the planet. And not expect to have some severe consequences. So I think there's some real, self-deception and denial going on, and increasingly a hardening of the environmental movement, which is not the direction we need to go.
Right. Well, good. I think that's affirming, because I think as long as theoretically the theoretical both sides continue to evolve their positions and converge closer and closer together, I think the better off we are. And it's strange how something like a smart meter can be the kind of the rallying cry for this to take place, the point of convergence. But it's a strange universe we live in too at the same time. So
it is, and I think the smart meter has become a symbol of where our technology has gone off the rails, where we become a slave to technology rather than technology serving us, and us,
right.
Using it in a balanced way and not in a way that hurts us. And it's become a symbol of false climate solutions, a symbol of corporate dominance, a symbol of where democracy has failed. And I don't think that the utility industry or the government really had any idea that this was coming. And I think that's that is a result of the arrogance that we see of people are too stupid to make decisions themselves. People are too, we're the smart ones. We're the ones that know the answers, and we can make decisions for the public. And I think that attitude has really gotten people's backs up. And we've seen more than a dozen arrests and a lot of civil unrest around this program. People shutting down, installation yards and standing up with their neighbors. And we need to see more of that. I mean, that's what we need to know our neighbors. We need to know what's going on in our neighborhood. We need to stand together, and as long as we, stay isolated and alone, and assume that someone else is going to take care of these big problems, that's not going to happen. We need to take personal responsibility, and I think that's what the experience has been through smart meter resistance movement that's been growing. Is that look, this is an opportunity. It's not just a horrible attack and infliction of forced radiation. This is an opportunity for us to begin to reclaim what we've had for a long time and just recently lost, and that is the ability for communities to determine their own destiny and to look out for their own interests and protect ourselves. And at the end of the day, that's what builds strong neighborhoods and ensures a safe future for us. Yeah.
Are you aware of Harp by any chance?
This is the military.
Yeah.
I've read articles about it. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, if anybody's done any research into Harp and smart meters. I think it would be kind of a fascinating, sort of off-road exercise there.
I can't say anything for sure, but what I can say is that 2 years ago, if you'd asked me whether electromagnetic fields have health impacts, I would have laughed at you as some crazy conspiracy theorist.
Right.
And then, I did the research. I looked at it. I've interviewed hundreds of people about this. I am absolutely convinced that it does have a health impact, and that it does have neurological effects and changes the way we think. And so that revelation that, hey, this is not just some wacky conspiracy theory of tinfoil hat, nutters, but this is actually a legitimate political and social issue that needs to be addressed. That's sort of led me to question a lot of the other things that I was previously dismissing, such as chemtrails or the Harp Program. And
right.
It's an absolute documented fact that the military has developed the technology that we need to use cell phones, that the military has done a lot of testing on the neurological and biological effects of this technology, and that there are potential military and national security uses, and that the fact that mainstream groups are increasingly looking into the sky and going, how come that jet is releasing a stream of stuff into the air and that jet isn't? And I think those are legitimate questions. I don't think that we should just trust what the government says or trust what the industries say. I think that for too often when we have trusted those entities, we've ended up being betrayed. And so most people use cell phones, and why do they? And most people assume that they're safe, but where are we getting that information from? And
right.
I think we just need to be doubly cautious in everything that we do. That we can't just assume that with this government in power that our health or our safety is being prioritized. That we really need to take it upon ourselves to do the research or to talk to alternate sources and to be skeptical, because I know too many people whose lives are being cut short by brain tumors associated with their cell phone use. I've given up my cell phone a year ago. I just don't. I think it's absolutely insane to hold what's essentially a low power microwave to your head.
Right.
And as soon as I gave up my cell phone, several months later, I became, sensitized to wireless technology. So I think that there's something that the cell phones are doing to people. It's sort of like I don't know if you've ever smoked, Robert, but smoke cigarettes, but when you smoke a cigarette, it tends to sort of dull the pain receptors in your lungs, and you become desensitized to secondhand smoke and other stuff, fire
right.
smoke. And when you quit, all of a sudden, the last thing you want to be around is a smoker, and you become really sensitive to smoke. And I think it may be something along the same lines with cell phones, is that when we're constantly inundated, when we're holding this really strong source of microwaves next to our head, we're sort of being desensitized from all this other wireless that's around in our environment. But when we give up the cell phone, we become sensitized to it, and especially with these smart meters pumping out really high levels of radiation, that's increasingly sensitizing people.
Right.
So, yeah, it's an issue that the mainstream media refuses to investigate or present, the issue of electromagnetic sensitivity, because it would really blow the whistle on the fact that this assumption that wireless technology is safe is not grounded. It's not grounded in fact. It's not proven. In fact, basically just the opposite at this point.
Well, yeah. Well, it sounds like you're making progress, which is good. I mean, let's round off our chat together with a recognition that you're making some progress here. And I want to thank you for all the work that you're doing, Josh. And people, if they want to find out more about this, they can go to stopsmartmeters.org, and they can donate to the cause so they can keep you kind of moving and grooving, and then find out more about the information and what they can do to keep it from happening in their environment. So
absolutely,
yeah. Thanks for coming on today, and thanks for being patient. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Robert. I really appreciate it. People, it can be a little overwhelming, this topic at first, but we're here to support you. We're here to support people, organizing groups in their own neighborhood and resisting, and that's what we do. We offer technical assistance. We offer advice on how to organize, how to resist this, and if people can volunteer their time or donate money, we would certainly appreciate that. And there's a lot of more information and frequently asked questions on our website at stopsmartmeters.org.
Okay, great information there. Thanks again, Josh, and have a great weekend, okay?
Thank you, Robert. Take care. All the best.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Joshua Hart, stopsmartmeters.org, and that's about 50 minutes worth of really power-packed information that you can actually use in your life. You can, if you have a smart meter attached to your house, you can go to his website. You can download the form letter. You can send it into PG&E or the Southern California. What is it? It's something Edison down in Southern California. And you can begin to reclaim the space in your home. Now, what's important here is, and we didn't really touch on this, is that if you have a smart meter, there's a very good chance your neighbor has one and your neighbor's neighbor has one. So you can begin to reclaim your space. But if you really want to reclaim your space, you need to go throughout your neighborhood and get other people on board. Now, that may be easier said than done. So, but at least, start at home where you can make a difference. Okay, I want to thank my guest today, Dr. Phil Valentine from the kinetic sciences world and his interesting work on our president, Barack Hussein Obama. I want to thank Josh Hart from softsmartmeters.org. I want to thank my chat maven, Janet, for being the chat maven that she is, and everybody else in the chat room for showing up, hanging out, and also anybody else that's listening. Thank you for listening to the program. My name is Robert Phoenix. You can go to my website, robertphoenix.com. If you enjoy this type of media, and it's meaningful for you to get information like this from people like Joshua Hart or Dr. Phil Valentine, go to my website and support independent media. I've got a chip in function on the top right hand side. I don't charge for this show. In fact, I pay to have this show on Blog Talk Radio, believe it or not. I pay them. So if you like it, like what you hear, and you want to support the continued flow of media coming in your direction, I urge you to do that. And I also do astrology. I'm an astrologer. I do charts. I do readings. It's another way that you can support this experience, and I can support you at the same time. So robertphoenix.com is where you can go to find out more about all those nodes of contact. Okay, I'll be back on Monday with the mashup, and we're going to be doing, I think, taking a little bit of a different tack with the mashup on Monday. We're going to change things up a little bit. So I'll see you on Monday, though, and you know the drill. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay open to what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. I've been your host, and you've been listening to the Friday Farcast. Take care.